let's talk about rollbacks. Not necessarily a development problem, but typically rolling back changes impacts development because people want to know, why are we rolling back? What's the problem? DBAs, it's a big stressor for them. They have to deal with worrying about actually getting the database back to a working system. And then they have to look at, what do we do wrong in development that caused that? Now, certainly this is one of the DevOps principles we want to take care of, that we want to ensure that we have a smooth process and we're learning, and that we have the ability to deploy our code easily and smoothly from one environment to the next. Now, there are a variety of reasons why a deployment may fail. It doesn't really matter what the reason is, but one of the ideas in DevOps is that we want to practice our deployments in multiple intermediate environments. We want each one of these to kind of be independently built, hopefully in the exact same configuration, the exact same way, so that we can build confidence as we deploy code from one environment to the next, and that we're sure our final deployment to production systems will actually work correctly. We also want to work with less risk, so we typically make smaller deployments with less code or less change more often. And that, again, gives us more confidence, less of a risk as we move through the environments. Hopefully we're not going to have any big problems if one of those small deployments fails. May or may not be the case with databases, but that's the idea. When we try to roll back an issue, with application code, typically what we can do is just copy the previous version of our files to the production system, whether this is a jar file, an exe, a DLL, whatever it is. We usually have those in some sort of artifact repository. We put them back on the server and client and replace the newer version with the old version. Works well, because state isn't important. We can replace at will. I can deploy an old version of a DLL or a new version as needed, assuming it works with the application, and work forward and backward in my software. For databases, it's not so simple. The first thing to keep in mind is, once I've committed a change, whether to relational or NoSQL, I can't just roll back that change. I can't just copy back some old object. Typically, this means I've got to either restore the database from a backup, which is something we never want to do. It takes time, it's expensive, it's disruptive, may lose data for sure. Or we issue some sort of reversing transaction that contains the old version of the code. And that's what we most often want to do. Again, for code objects, this can be simple. Views, store procedures, functions, JavaScript modules, etc. We take the old version, we put it back in the database. As long as logically that works, we can do that. As long as we don't have any dependency on other objects, that's fine. But database has to maintain state in the table, right? Or sometimes in something like materialized view, we're maintaining the state. And so the rollback for that table code or for that data is not so simple. I can't just replace the old object with a new object most of the time. Now, in some cases, it could be true. If I've added a column to a table, I could just drop the column. That assumes I detect the problem quickly, no data was added between my deployment and the rollback time. But what if I made some other change? What if I truncated data in a column to a shorter length because of requirement? Or I performed a merge of two columns into one? That is not such an easy thing to roll back with. The original data is not present. Certainly if time has passed, minutes, hours, then how do I deal with that data? A restore might lose data. If I want to do manipulation of the code by doing a reversing transaction, I might not be able to split that data back out, or I might not be able to recover the original data because it no longer exists. The reversing logic, the reversing process, not always apparent or easy to figure out in a crisis. So we want to be very careful with rollbacks and counting on them. It's definitely a challenge in development. Various ways we can deal with it. We could pre-write rollback scripts. We could have restore databases available in a warm state. Any number of things we could do, but we have to think about rollbacks as we're performing development and as we're preparing for deployment. We'll talk about the specifics later in the course and how we might handle the challenges of this, but for now, keep in mind rollbacks are definitely one of the challenges of database development.